family story from coastal Maine. I pulled off the linen cover and touched one key on the piano. The sound was soft, fragile, like the way my late husband once hummed that song to me. I hadn't played in months. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, said it was clutter and covered it, like she was burying my past. I sat on the old bench ready to play again when it happened. A sudden crack. The hand of my own son, David, struck my face. "You gave this house to us, Mom. That means this piano belongs to us, too. Stop acting like it's still yours," he said coldly. My glasses slipped, my cheek burned. I froze, not from fear, but from shock. Then Chloe's heel slammed into my shin. She smiled with cruelty. "You never did know your place, did you? After all I gave them, after every sacrifice, is this what I am now?" My name is Maggie Vance, 62 years old, widow, once a businesswoman in coastal Maine. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about a piano. It was about erasing me, piece by piece, and I could not let that happen. Subscribe if you like this kind of story. I had always known my son. David carried the same restless ambition his father once did. But unlike my late husband Arthur, he didn't build things with patience. He gambled with them. For months, I watched from the sidelines as my son poured everything into a riverfront development project. He spoke of high-rise condos, gleaming glass, money that would flow like the tide. Chloe cheered him on, posting glossy sketches online, calling herself a visionary's wife. Then came the government notice. Floodplain restrictions, revoked permits. Overnight, the investors pulled out, and the dream collapsed into debt. When I answered the phone that night, David's voice was ragged. "Mom, we lost the apartment. The bank's on us. My wife, Chloe, we don't have anywhere else to go." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I heard Arthur's voice again, soft and steady. "Family is never turned away." So I said the only words a mother knows. "Come home, David." The door will be open, but when the door did open days later, and they stepped inside with their suitcases and bruised pride, I felt the air shift. David's shoulders were heavy with defeat. Chloe's, however, carried something sharper, her chin high, her eyes already scanning the rooms as if measuring them for her own designs. It wasn't desperation I saw in her face. It was opportunity. I had told him the door would be open, and so it was. It was late afternoon, the kind of drizzle that softens the edges of the sky. I had just finished wiping down the window frame when I heard tires screech to a stop outside the gate. David came in first, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bruised from nights without sleep. Behind him trailed Chloe, heels muddied, suitcase wheels grinding against the wooden floor. Even soaked in rain, she carried herself like she was walking into a house that already belonged to her. "Mom," David said quickly, almost breathless, "it's just until we're back on our feet." Just temporary. A couple of months at most. Temporary? I glanced at the luggage piled by the door. "You look like you packed for more than a season." Chloe laughed, light but sharp, colder than the polite charm I used to know. "Well, you know me. I can't live out of a suitcase. I need—" Order, David cut in, trying to soften her words. "She's right, Mom. Chloe's been under a lot of stress. We both have. The investment didn't go as planned." "Didn't go as planned," Chloe repeated, her smile thin, her tone correcting him. "That's a polite way of saying we were swindled. And now we're here. But don't worry, Maggie. We'll make the place feel fresh again. Bright. Alive." Her words scraped against me. "Fresh? This house has always been alive, Chloe. Every wall here has a memory." She drifted toward the parlor, trailing her hand across the linen-draped piano. She tapped her nail against the cover, head tilted, eyes narrowing. "Or maybe some memories are too heavy. This old thing takes up half the room. We could replace it with something modern. Open the space up. Chloe." David started, but his voice faltered. "Just saying." She shrugged, then smiled. This time it was no longer polite. It was a blade. Sometimes clinging to the past keeps us from moving forward. I clenched my hands behind my back. I'd seen that look before. The disdain when she wrinkled her nose at the smell of old wood in the kitchen, or when she watched me pour tea the way Arthur liked it. I'd always told myself, it's only her way. She doesn't mean harm. David turned back to me, eyes rimmed red. "Please, Mom." "Just until we're steady again." I swear it won't be long I studied him. The veins tight at his temple, the tremor in the same hands I once guided across busy streets when he was 5. Slowly I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Of course, David. You're my son. This house will shelter you, as it always has Chloe's. Thank you, followed softly, almost sweet. But to me, it didn't sound like gratitude. It sounded like a claim. I turned away, exhaling into the damp air, seeping through the doorway, tasting the warning in it. The house smelled faintly of rain and lemon oil. Chloe had thrown open every window that morning, saying the place needed airing out. I sat at the dining table, the contract spread before me like a map I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. David leaned in, his fingers drumming nervously on the wood. It's simple, Mom. Just a formality. With your name on the deed, the banks won't touch us. If you sign it over, temporarily, we can rebuild. You'll always have this house. Nothing changes. I traced the edge of the paper with my fingertip, remembering the way I used to trace the lines of his palm when he was a boy, promising he'd grow strong. Now his hand trembled against the table, though he tried to hide it. Chloe sat perfectly poised across from me, her perfume thick in the air. She flipped a page with a manicured nail and said lightly, We'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about Bill's upkeep, any of it. You deserve to rest. Her words dripped with sweetness, but her eyes had already drifted toward the parlor, toward the piano, the one Arthur bought in our first year together, the one written into the agreement as my personal property, exempt from transfer. I felt the sting in that glance. She wasn't just thinking about dusting it. She was already deciding where to sell it. I picked up the pen. For a moment, the room was hushed, the only sound the steady tick of the wall clock. Then I set the pen down again. One condition, I said. David blinked. Mom? I folded my hands and steadied my voice. There will be a clause. If there is ever evidence of abuse, physical, financial, or otherwise, the transfer is null and void. Everything reverts to me. No delays, no appeals, and the piano remains mine. Always Chloe laughed, a sharp little sound that cracked the quiet. That's unnecessary. We'd never... David cut her off, voice low, pleading. It's fine, Chloe. Mom, you'll never need that. You trust me, don't you? I looked at him for a long moment, my son, hollowed out by failure, still trying to smile. My heart ached, but my hand was steady as I picked up the pen again. I do trust you, I said softly, and then, almost under my breath, as the clock ticked louder in my ears, but I also trust myself. The ink bled into the paper, black against white, a signature of love, and a safeguard against its betrayal. They called it freshening up the house. Within a week, the living room walls were stripped of the warm cream Arthur and I had chosen, and drowned in a sterile gray Chloe found in some magazine. My heavy velvet curtains, Arthur's favorite because they kept out the harsh afternoon sun, were torn down, replaced with thin white drapes that made the room feel like a waiting room instead of a home. Then came the photographs. Not of family, not of Arthur, not even of David as a child. No, Chloe had enlarged glossy portraits of herself in tailored dresses, all teeth and ambition, and hung them where our wedding picture used to be. The house no longer smelled of lemon oil and wood. It smelled of synthetic candles, lavender and vanilla, the kind that clung to your throat. And the piano, my piano, was shoved into the corner, covered in a linen cloth as if it were a coffin. Too old-fashioned, Chloe said with a dismissive wave. We'll leave it there for now, maybe make it a statement piece. Every time I tried to brush the cloth back, to let the keys breathe, she was there. A glance sharp as a blade, a shake of her head, a hand raised in warning. Not a word spoken, but the message was clear. Don't touch. The first time, I laughed it off, told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I felt a sting of humiliation. By the third, I understood. This was not redecorating. It was erasure. Piece by piece, they were sanding me out of my own history. My curtains, my photographs, my piano, each change a quiet decree that this was no longer my home. And I let it happen. Not because I agreed. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to see just how far they were willing to go. I used to think the piano was the most extravagant thing Arthur ever bought me. We couldn't really afford it back then. He was still teaching at the college, I was working nights at the bakery, but one Saturday, he came home with a grin that made him look like a boy again, and behind him 2 movers carried in a mahogany upright, polished and proud. He sat down that evening, fingers clumsy but determined, and played 3 broken notes of a song he said was mine. I laughed until tears rolled down my face, and then I kissed him because love often begins in broken notes. For years, that piano filled our house. Arthur learned slowly, stubbornly, until he could play whole songs, his voice humming low to cover the mistakes. Later, when his illness hollowed him out, I played for him instead. My hands on the keys were the only way to keep the silence from swallowing us whole. And David, my sweet boy, he once sat beside me, his legs too short to reach the pedals, his small hand trembling over the ivory keys. "Again, Mom?" he'd ask after every wrong note, and I would nod, patient, proud. Back then, his mistakes felt like promises, that he was still learning, still growing. Now, years later, he flinches when I touch the same keys. His hand trembles not from effort, but from shame. Shame for debts he can't pay. Shame for the wife who pushes him forward and the mother he pushes aside. The piano hasn't moved, but the people have. Arthur is gone, David has hardened, and me, I have become a shadow in my own parlor, forbidden to touch the one thing that carried all of our laughter, our love, our sound. Sometimes late at night I stand near it, my fingers hovering over the covered keys. I ask myself, what am I clinging to? The wood, the strings, the past? Or is it myself, proof that I existed here, that I mattered? The answer comes in whispers, the way memory does. I'm not clinging, I'm remembering. And perhaps that is what terrifies them most, that as long as the piano still sings in my memory, I have not yet disappeared. It was after dinner when Chloe started. She leaned back in her chair, her smile as polished as the silverware she refused to let me use. "You've done so much already, Maggie." "Really, you should relax. You get so tired these days. I worry you'll overstrain yourself." "Isn't that right, David?" David raised his glass, the ice clinking. "Yeah, she shouldn't stress." He didn't look at me, only at the amber liquid swirling in his hand. I forced a small smile. "Tired?" I ran a business while nursing a dying husband. I lifted him, bathed him, fed him when his own body betrayed him. If exhaustion was going to break me, Chloe, it would have been then. The next evening, she stood by the piano, tapping her nails on the covered keys. "This poor thing. It's practically furniture now. Don't you think, Maggie? Maybe it belongs in a collector's home, not taking up space here." I set down my knitting, my voice even. "That piano was listed as mine in the contract." "It stays." Her smile sharpened. Of course. I was only suggesting." "You don't even play anymore, do you? Maybe you've forgotten how forgotten?" "No, Chloe. My fingers still remember every note Arthur loved, every wrong chord David struck as a boy. The only thing I've forgotten is when kindness left this house." David coughed, shifted in his chair, then muttered, "Maybe Mom just doesn't want to." He drank again, retreating into silence. "You could have defended me, son. You once begged me to play you lullabies when storms rattled the windows. Now you won't even meet my eyes." Chloe's voice was honey over glass. "We just want what's best for you. You don't need to hold on to so many things. Isn't that right, David?" He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, it's for the best." "For the best? Whose best, David?" "Not mine. Never mine." I sat through it, nodding when expected, smiling when cornered. But inside, a different kind of stillness settled over me. Not surrender, calculation. Later that night, the house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking too loud in the silence. Upstairs, I heard them laughing faintly, the clink of glasses. My chest ached. Not from their cruelty, I had weathered worse, but from his silence. My son, once my defender, now my echo. I touched the rim of my teacup, still warm, and whispered to myself, "So this is how it ends." Not with anger, with indifference. I took off my glasses, wiped them clean, and pressed the hidden switch. A tiny red light blinked once. If David would no longer remember who I was, then I would remember for both of us. Every word, every silence, every betrayal. It happened slowly, almost politely. One afternoon, I came back from the market, arms aching from the weight of groceries. Rain dripped down the back of my coat as I punched in the door code. Red. I tried again, slower this time, thinking I'd pressed wrong. Red again. I stood there, water seeping into my shoes, when Chloe finally opened the door. She looked surprised, then smiled in that way of hers. Bright on the surface, sharp underneath. "Oh, Maggie." "Didn't David tell you?" "We had the locks changed." Security can't be too careful these days. I shifted the bag of apples in my arms. And the new code? Her head tilted. I'll check with David. For now, just ring the bell when you return. Easier that way. I stepped inside, dripping on the hardwood I once polished myself. She closed the door behind me, the click of the lock echoing like a verdict. Not a shout, not an insult, just a door that no longer opened for me. A few days later, an email arrived. Short, clinical. Dear Maggie, moving forward, please text before coming into the kitchen or living room. We're working to establish our own family dynamic. Thank you for understanding. I read it 3 times. The kitchen where I cooked Arthur's meals, where David once licked cookie dough from a wooden spoon. The living room where our Christmas tree once stood, where Arthur played carols on the piano. Now I needed permission to enter. I deleted the message, but its sting stayed. Guest, intruder, outsider. That evening their laughter floated down from upstairs. Chloe's high-polished notes, David's deeper hum. Do you laugh at me now, son? Or do you laugh because forgetting me is easier than defending me? The last cut came at dinner. The table was set, candles lit. But Chloe had taken my chair, the head of the table, the place I had sat for decades. Not out of pride, but because it was where I served, where I gave thanks, where Arthur once reached across to squeeze my hand. I paused behind her, hand resting on the back of the chair. She glanced up, her smile sweet and poisonous. Oh, this seat is better for me, Maggie. You don't mind, do you? You'll be more comfortable down here. At the end, David poured himself another drink, the bottleneck clinking against glass. He didn't look up, didn't speak. I sat at the far end in the shadows where the candlelight barely reached. My plate looked smaller there, my food colder. I lifted the fork slowly, chewing each bite without taste. Every inch they take, they believe I won't notice. The locks, the rooms, the chair. But I notice. I always notice. And I keep the record. One day, the world will notice too. When I decide it's time. The study smelled faintly of dust and leather, a room I once filled with ledgers and shipping contracts. Now it was Chloe's office. She had left the door ajar that afternoon, a rare carelessness. I went in looking for a warranty slip she accused me of losing. The new oven had stopped working, and of course it was my fault. The drawer stuck halfway, the wood groaning as if it wanted me to stop. I pulled harder. A stack of files slid forward, neat, too neat. I froze when I saw the labels, written in Chloe's precise looping script. Transfer of assets. Estate strategy. And then the one that stole the air from my lungs. Cognitive decline affidavit. My fingers hovered above it before I dared to pull it free. Inside was a draft affidavit, the kind I'd seen years ago when negotiating with clients about guardianship disputes. Pages of legalese, cold, clinical, already prepared with blanks left open for signatures and dates. Highlighted phrases burned into me. Diminished capacity to manage personal and financial affairs. Voluntary relinquishment of authority. Senior residency waiver. I knew these words. I'd seen what they could do. With one signed affidavit, a person became a shadow in the eyes of the court. Contracts nullified. Decisions revoked. All power transferred to the competent party. They weren't just stealing my house. They were planning to erase me from my own life, line by line, clause by clause. My hand shook as I flipped another page. A lawyer's name I didn't recognize. Margin notes in Chloe's handwriting. File once new medical report is in. A checklist with boxes. Transfer accounts, update deeds, secure appraisal. I pressed the papers flat on the desk, forcing my eyes to steady. I am not losing my mind. I am not incompetent. But if they convince the law otherwise, it won't matter what's true. It will only matter what's written. For a moment, I wanted to tear the affidavit into shreds, scatter it like confetti across her polished floor. But then I thought of my glasses. Heavy on my face, the tiny lens inside already recording my trembling fingers, brushing over those damning words. Evidence. That was stronger than anger. I slid the folder back into place, aligning the corners exactly as I found them. Chloe's order was meticulous. She would notice the slightest shift. In the kitchen, I set the kettle to boil. The whistle rose, slowly, sharp, insistent. I steadied my breath against it. They think age is weakness. They think silence is surrender. But I built a company from nothing, drafted contracts sharper than any blade they could wield. If they want to fight me in the language of law, then law will be my weapon too. The red light blinked once in my glasses, catching the steam rising from the kettle. I whispered into the empty room, "You think I'm fading?" But I remember everything, and the law remembers too. It was morning when Chloe made her announcement. She stood in the parlor, her hand resting on the linen-covered piano. "This is going to a showroom downtown," she said brightly. "Takes up too much space." "Too old." "And honestly, Maggie, it doesn't suit the feng shui of the room." I folded my hands in my lap. Feng shui. A word you found in a magazine, now sharp enough to cut me out of my own home. You don't see wooden strings, you see clutter. I rose slowly, walked past her perfume-heavy presence, and pulled back the linen. Dust shimmered in the sunlight. I lowered myself onto the bench, the same creak it had made for 40 years. My fingers touched the keys. One note, then another. David stormed in, drink still in hand. "Mom!" "Stop! We said it's not yours anymore." I looked at him, the boy who once begged me for one more lullaby. "Not mine?" "These notes carried your childhood, David. I gave them to you like bread, like air." "I'm just playing," I said softly. Chloe's heels clicked against the floor. She stepped closer, voice sharp behind the sweetness. "You're being difficult." "We've made the decision." "It's done." My fingers pressed down again, the sound trembling through the house. "Difficult. That's what you call memory now. That's what you call love." David's face darkened. He raised his hand and it struck fast, sharp against my cheek. My glasses shifted, the room tilting. For a moment I saw Arthur again, watching me from the doorway, his brow furrowed in quiet defense. But it wasn't him standing there. It was David, silent and complicit in his wife's cruelty. Before I could steady myself, Chloe's heel slammed into my shin, precise and deliberate. I let myself crumple to the rug, not from pain, but from choice. If they think I'm weak, let them. Weakness is the mask I will wear until the truth unmasks them. I lay still, palms against the fibers I did not choose, the scent of artificial lavender choking me. Above me, Chloe's breathing came fast, victorious. David swallowed his drink like nothing had happened. The piano keys still vibrated faintly, the last notes lingering. And in my glasses, a tiny red light blinked. Every word, every strike, every betrayal, recorded, preserved. I touched my cheek, warm from his hand, and whispered inside myself, "This is the proof. This is the moment. They think they've won, but today they gave me everything I need." The announcement came as casually as setting the table. Chloe stood in the parlor, phone in hand, her voice bright, practiced. "I've spoken to a dealer downtown. They're sending someone next week to appraise the piano. It's old, it's bulky, and honestly, Maggie, it just doesn't fit the energy of the room." I looked at her, then at the linen-covered shape in the corner. My piano, Arthur's gift. Energy of the room? It was the heartbeat of this house long before you set foot in it. I kept my voice even. "That piano was written as mine in the contract." "It is not yours to sell." Chloe's smile didn't falter. "Contracts can be, reinterpreted. Besides, you don't play anymore, do you? It deserves a better home? Better home? Or a better price in your pocket?" I walked past her and pulled back the linen cloth. Dust motes rose in the air, dancing in the light. I lowered myself onto the bench. The wood creaked under me, familiar, steady. My fingers hovered above the keys, then pressed 3 notes, soft, imperfect, but alive. The sound filled the room, cutting through the lavender scent Chloe loved to spray. For a moment I felt Arthur's hand on mine, David's small fingers pressing alongside mine as a boy, but the present rushed back. "Stop it!" David's voice cracked as he came storming in, whiskey glass still in hand. "This isn't your house anymore, Mom. You don't touch what's not yours." His words hit harder than the slap that followed. My glasses slipped crooked, the skin on my cheek burning. Not my house? I carried this family inside these walls. Every brick here was mortgaged on my sacrifice. If it isn't mine, then whose is it? Before I could breathe, Chloe's heel struck my shin, sharp, deliberate. Pain shot up my leg, but worse was her face above me, satisfied, triumphant. "You need to learn your place, Maggie." I let myself slide onto the rug, not from the pain, but from a decision. My palms pressed against fibers I had never chosen. My place? No, Chloe. It is you who has no place here, and the world will soon see it. The room blurred for a moment, but through the smear of my glasses I caught the faintest red light blinking back at me. My hidden lens had captured it all. The words, the slap, the kick, the arrogance. I pushed myself up slowly, adjusted my shawl. They expected tears, screaming resistance. Instead, I gave them silence. Inside, my voice was calm, steady. You believe you've beaten me, but all you've done is sign your own confession. I stood in the hallway, my cheek still stinging where David's hand had landed, my shin throbbing from Chloe's heel. The chandelier above me glittered coldly, indifferent. They thought silence meant defeat. They forgot silence can be strategy. I picked up my phone and dialed 3 numbers. The line clicked. 911. What is your emergency? I kept my voice steady, almost detached. This is Maggie Vance. I need to report an incident of abuse. My daughter-in-law struck me. My son stood by. I am safe at this time, but I want this call logged. The dispatcher hesitated. Ma'am, are you requesting immediate response? No, I said, adjusting my crooked glasses. I request documentation. Please note, date, time, and parties involved. This call is evidence I ended the call before they could ask more. The silence returned, heavy, final. But now it wasn't empty silence, it was legal record. In cases of elder abuse, the hardest battle is proof. Without record, cruelty becomes hearsay. With record, it becomes evidence admissible in court. Today I placed my first stone. I breathed out slowly, the way I used to steady my hand, before signing contracts worth millions. This time, the contract was for my survival. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Gable pruning her chrysanthemums. She waved, I smiled back. She saw a calm widow. She would never know I had just built a wall of law around myself. When I shut the door, I touched the frame of my glasses. The red light blinked once, steady. Video. Audio. Now the 911 call log. 3 strands of evidence woven into a rope. Assault, abuse, neglect. These were not just bruises anymore. They were a case file in the making. And one day soon, that file would close on David and Chloe like a steel trap. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and cold air from the vent above. A long mahogany table divided us, its surface polished to a false shine. Chloe entered first, heels clicking like tiny hammers. She wore a tailored white pantsuit, every line crisp, her confidence rehearsed. David followed, sunglasses indoors, his steps slower, but his smirk intact. They sat across from me. Chloe leaned forward, smile practiced. Maggie, this is for the best. Once you sign, everything will be simpler. You'll be secure. We'll take care of you. I folded my hands, said nothing. Secure, you mean invisible. Managed like an asset, not a life. David pushed the final contract across the table, his fingers steady now. Just a signature, Mom. That's all. Then you can finally rest. I placed my palm on the paper, felt the weight of it. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Across from me, Chloe's eyes gleamed, victory already written in them. That was when Elliot, seated beside me, opened his briefcase. The sound of the leather snapping echoed too loudly in the room. He drew out a folder, thick, stamped in red. Then he set his tablet on the table, screen black for now. Before Mrs. Vance signs anything, Elliot said evenly, there is documentation that must be entered into record. Chloe blinked. Documentation? Elliot's gaze was calm, unblinking. Yes. Video from Mrs. Vance's glasses, audio transcripts, and a verified 911 call log. The room went utterly still. The tablet flickered to life with a touch of Elliot's hand. A frozen frame appeared on the screen. My parlor, the piano in the corner, Chloe's sharp profile caught mid-sneer. He pressed play. The sound cracked through the room, David's voice loud, raw. This isn't your house anymore, Mom. You don't touch what's not yours. Then the flat crack of a slap, the thud of a heel striking. Chloe's voice cold and cutting. You need to learn your place, Maggie. The notary's pen slipped against her page. Chloe inhaled sharply, her painted lips parting without words. David's hand tightened around the chair, knuckles white. The video cut off. Elliot let the silence weigh, then reached for the folder he'd set on the table earlier. He opened it with deliberate calm. Clause 9, he said, voice measured, resonant, inserted by Mrs. Vance at the time of transfer? Chloe frowned, her voice strained. Clause 9? What clause? Elliot's eyes met hers. the clause stipulating that if there is proof of abuse, physical, financial, or emotional, toward the original proprietor, all transfers are rendered null and void. Effective immediately, he laid down the documents one by one, the transcript of the 911 call, certified and stamped, the audio files of whispered insults and veiled threats, the video still of Chloe's heel raised against my shin. Each page struck the table like a gavel. David's face drained of color, anger rising behind his eyes. He half rose from his chair, then froze, as if some invisible weight held him down. Chloe's nails clicked against the table, her composure cracking. This is manipulation. She's twisting everything. But Elliot didn't look at her. He looked only at the notary, who was already scanning the clause, lips moving as she read. The air conditioner hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. And in that sterile room, the power shifted, quietly, irreversibly. So this is justice, I thought. Not a sword, not a shout, just words, ink, and proof. And they never saw it coming. The notary adjusted her glasses, scanning Clause 9 again, lips tightening as she read. The shuffle of paper was the only sound in the room. David shifted in his seat, his knee bouncing rapidly under the table. Chloe leaned forward, her voice thin, brittle. This is ridiculous. She's senile, manipulated. Clause 9 was just ceremonial. It was never meant to be enforced. Elliot's tone was calm, steady, merciless. On the contrary. It was reviewed, witnessed, and signed. And as of today, with documented abuse verified by video, audio, and a 911 log, Clause 9 is active. He pushed the folder toward the notary. The weight of it hit the table with a dull, final sound. For a long moment, the notary said nothing. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she reached for her stamp. Ink pad. Press lift. The sound of rubber meeting paper cracked through the silence like a gavel. Revocation confirmed. Chloe recoiled, her chair scraping back against the floor. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words that wouldn't come. David's face twisted, rage, disbelief, and the hollow terror of a man watching everything slip away. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting lightly on the cool mahogany table. My heart was steady, my breath even. So this is how it ends. Not with me signing their paper, but with the law stamping mine. The house, the assets, my name, all returned. Not as a gift, but as a right reclaimed. Chloe slammed her hands against the table. You can't do this. Elliot's eyes didn't waver. It isn't us doing this, Mrs. Vance. It's the law. And you brought it upon yourselves. David opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. His shoulders sagged. He looked at me, his eyes no longer fierce, just hollow. I met his gaze. No anger, no tears, only a quiet certainty. You forgot, David, I whispered. I remember everything. By morning, Chloe was already crying into her phone, mascara streaked, her voice breaking for an audience she thought would save her. My mother-in-law, she's confused, unstable. She kicked us out. We're homeless. We tried to care for her. She clutched David's arm mid-broadcast. He stood behind her, jaw tight, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't speak, but his silence was meant to agree with her lies. For a few hours, people believed them. Sympathy flooded in. Comments called me cruel, selfish, senile. But then the video appeared. The slap, the kick, Chloe's voice vicious and sharp. You need to learn your place, Maggie. David's words, colder still. This isn't your house anymore, Mom. Side by side with Chloe's crocodile tears, the truth became undeniable. The tide turned fast. Overnight, Chloe's brand endorsements crumbled. Designers, lifestyle companies, magazines, they all cut ties, each statement colder than the last. We do not condone elder abuse. And David, my son, was dragged into the light. At first, he tried to fight. It's not what it looks like, he barked at a reporter outside their apartment. His voice cracked. It was a private family matter. She's twisting everything. But numbers don't twist. Bank records surfaced, loans unpaid, transfers flagged. The renovation project he once boasted about was exposed as a shell of debt and deception. The financial press called him reckless. The authorities called him fraudulent. I watched a clip of him on the evening news. His shoulders hunched, his once confident stride reduced to a shuffle as journalists shouted questions. For the first time, he looked not like a predator, but a man drowning in his own lies. And I felt no triumph, only the hollow ache of recognition. You were once the boy who asked me to play one more lullaby when storms rattled your windows. Now the storm is yours, David, and I cannot shield you from it. I sat in my condo that night, the tide rolling out beyond the window, tea cooling in my hand. The world had passed judgment. Chloe had lost her stage. David had lost his mask. And me? I had gained back something far greater than assets. I had gained back my voice. It was a clear autumn morning when I stood at the podium. The banner behind me read, "The Silent Keys Foundation." The name had come to me one night as I sat by the piano staring at its covered keys. Once, Chloe had waved her hand dismissively and said, "It's just furniture." A relic. But I knew better. Silence is not absence. Silence can hold memory. Silence can hold power. And now, silence had become the anthem for those like me, seniors stripped of their voices, their assets, their dignity. The hall was filled. Rows of faces, mostly gray-haired, lined and worn, but each pair of eyes carried a story. Homes mortgaged away, bank accounts drained, wills coerced in the quiet corners of kitchens. Some clutched folders of their own, thick with papers no one had wanted to read. I looked at them, and for the first time in years, I did not feel alone. When I spoke, I did not use notes. My words rose from the place where years of silence had been stored. "I am not here as a victim," I began. "I am here as proof. Proof that even when we are silenced, even when we are dismissed, even when the world tells us we are too old to matter, we still endure. If you have ever been told you are a burden in the very home you built, if you have been made to feel like a guest at your own table, this foundation is for you. We will offer legal aid for those trapped by contracts they never understood or were bullied into signing. We will build safe housing for those forced out of their own beds, and we will amplify voices that were never meant to be quiet." The room was still heavy with listening. Then I caught sight of him, my grandson, in the front row. He had always been different. The night of the slap, after I had been shut out, he had slipped through the back door, carrying a glass of water and a cloth for my cheek. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't needed to. His quiet presence was answer enough. Now, grown, he met my eyes without flinching. The same eyes his grandfather once had. I smiled at him, and in that smile there was both sorrow and hope. "This foundation is not built on revenge," I told the crowd. "It is built on memory, on love, on the refusal to let cruelty write the last chapter of our lives." They thought my silence was weakness, but I was listening. And now the world is listening too. Applause rose, not wild, but steady. A sound like rain on a roof, relentless, sure. That night, when I returned home, I walked straight to the piano. The cloth still covered it. My hands, though aged, were steady as I folded the linen back. The keys gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Some yellowed with years, some chipped. I lowered myself onto the bench. For a moment, I simply sat there, feeling the wood beneath me, the weight of memory pressing down. Then I played. Just a few notes, Arthur's song, broken and imperfect, the same way he had first played it for me when we were young and too poor to afford more than one good meal a day. The sound filled the room, fragile but alive, and as the last note lingered, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not farewell, not grief, a beginning. The camera would fade to black, the piano's last note still echoing faintly, and my voice, steady, deliberate, would remain. They thought I was fading. They thought my silence meant surrender. But silence is not weakness. Silence listens. Silence remembers. And silence, when the time is right, speaks louder than any scream. I lost a son. I lost a home. But I found my voice. And with it I found a new beginning. Dignity, once reclaimed, is unshakable. And memory is a fortress no one can take from us. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe to the channel for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.